We're looking at specifically at solutions for teachers, and the phrase that jumped out of the new standard 4 is, as per the title, note that teachers are expected or required or obliged. I'm not sure how forceful that will be, but it's recommended that teachers know which students choose to engage in physical activity. So this really speaks to probably my favorite quote, which is from a Swedish guy called Mikael Quinisted. And I like this because it's just so straightforward. So we've been talking for many, many years around what the purpose of PE is. And before we dive into the standards, I think it's probably worth coming up a level and thinking, what are we trying to do every day where we go to work and you're working, across the country with thousands and thousands of young people, and they take part in their PE, they pick up PE credits depending on what grade they're in. What are we trying to do? What is the outcome? Because the outcome's probably not getting the grade, getting the credit rather. I've never spoken to a pre-service or an in-service teacher, and they tell me that, what really motivates them is young people getting their credits. We are in the business of introducing kids to this magical world that is physical activity and the real benefits that can bring to a person's life. And so Mikael Quinisted said the only real sustainable aim of PE is that kids want to do more PE. Now, I would probably broaden that. As per the title and the language in the standard, they engage in physical activity. So I would probably say the only real sustainable aim for PE is that young people want to be more physically active. So that brings us to a really difficult question, because saying that is pretty straightforward. The difficult question is, what do we need to equip our young people with in order to set them up for a life that is better in and through physical activity, or is better because they've got physical activity in their life? So just a brief recap, the standards basically say that to answer the question I just posed, to unlock the world of physical activity, young people need to develop movement competency. And it's really interesting, which movements do they need to develop competency? And we're not talking about standard 1, 2, and 3 today, but I'll just throw those out as questions. And I've always thought of any physical activity as simply being a movement challenge, a movement problem. I want to walk up a hill. I need to solve the problems that the hill poses. I need to judge my pace, my stride length. I want to get a ball past a group of defenders to a given zone. Then I need to be able to throw, catch, move, dodge, accelerate, decelerate, etc., to unlock that puzzle. I hope that makes sense. It's not the key point of today, but I'm just framing it that the kids need to move well enough to unlock the problems that are in front of them. Similarly, standard 2 is that they need to apply knowledge. And you probably can't divorce the thinking with the movement. So if you go back to, I need to be able to throw and catch, it's probably not enough. You need to know who to throw to and how to throw to someone so that they can catch, and where to throw to them, etc. So the knowledge, the applied knowledge in the example I just give, is coupled with the movement competency and this idea of unlocking the problem. And then standard 3 talks about a really good quality physical education program. Enables young people to develop the social skills to connect to people in and through activity. And then we've got the reframed, much more prominent, as Jordan said in his introduction, much more prominent standard 4. And I've paraphrased this, and you might challenge this. I've said it's really about the young person building a connection to activity. And if they build that connection, they are likely to choose to engage in physical activity. They feel connected. They feel that sense of belonging as opposed to disbelonging. So I hope that's really clear. And this is the actual wording that they do. Young people, the student develops personal skills, identifies personal benefits of movement, and chooses to engage in physical activity. And just before we move on, a really brief word on what are the personal benefits of movement. Now, we're all pretty familiar with the supposed benefits of movement, but I think the insertion of the word personal really gives it a new dimension, because this is not saying what you or I think the benefits of movement to that young person's lives are. It's giving them the tools so that they can articulate the benefits that they get from moving their way. And I've actually taken it from the circle and said, in this slide, I'm saying that the notion of choosing to engage in physical activity is a precursor and a prerequisite of developing through the other domains, if we're comfortable and happy calling standards 1, 2, and 3 domains: the physical domain, the cognitive domain, and the social domain. And if we want to extend that language, and we're happy with it, this is around what young people are feeling. This is the psychosocial, or sometimes I would refer to the affective domain, around affection, feelings, and emotions. So those emotions drive behaviors. We do what we love. We do what we feel positive about. And if there's a choice, we're always going to go with the things that we feel a strong sense of connection to. So we're not going to develop as movers, especially you've got 1 hour of phys ed a week. You're not going to develop necessarily the movement competency within that time. But if they choose to do more, they will. And similarly, they're not going to develop as thinkers. They're not going to develop and be able to apply knowledge if they don't have plenty of opportunity to apply that knowledge, and similarly building those relationships in and through activity. And then what the outcomes are, how they choose to be active, that's the personal decision, as well as why they choose to be active. So how do we, I'm going to keep coming back to this problem, how do we know which students choose to be active? And there's a lot of insight data that's required there. There's a lot of understanding, and it is, really challenging to really have that knowledge at our fingertips. Just a very brief word on Standard 4 is really encapsulating genuinely global conversations that are happening in our space and in our subject area. Lots of talk about physical literacy, lots of talk around meaningfulness through movement, meaningful PE. And the language that Shape have deliberately used draws upon the language which is prominent in both of those conversations, overlapping conversations, I should add. So in physical literacy, certainly here in the United Kingdom, we've reframed it as a person's relationship with physical activity, which is shaped by, well, first of all, it is a personal relationship, exactly the language around Shape that Shape are using, that is around the values that we give to physical activity, how much we enjoy it, and the meaning that we take from it. And not all of them need to be present. There's a really complex relationship between enjoyment and meaning. I could find something really meaningful, but not necessarily enjoy it in the sense that I've got a big smile on my face. I'm thinking like, I don't know, some endurance running. I ran a 10K. Now, granted, I'm not a 12-year-old kid in grade 7 or 8, but I ran a 10K, and there were times when it really didn't feel very enjoyable. But boy, there was a lot of meaning around that, and I really valued the experience. Moving on, because I don't want to dwell on this for too long, around movement. And when people choose to be physically active, and again, we've got the same themes here, they need to be able to move, they need to be able to connect to the people in the space and the place, they need to think to understand what's going on, and they need to feel great in that space. And if we go to the 5, sometimes there's additional features that have been added, but the work from Deidre Neen Cronin and Tim Fletcher and lots of other people who are writing around this. They're talking about what's personally relevant, what is fun. Personally, I would challenge the word fun, but that's recently been expanded to be delight and to joy. So we're looking for young people to have delightful and joyful experiences where they can socially interact, where they can develop competency and they can develop and they can meet challenges. I mentioned walking up a hill or scoring against a defense, whatever it is, I can overcome challenges. Now, in the many of the conversations I've had with Jordan, he does a lot of fantastic work where his students begin, and I know Jordan's reframed the language a little bit, but they begin to articulate what is their relationship with an activity. And this leads us to a really interesting point that activity preference is not just which activities I like doing, but how I might engage with those activities. So if we take a simple, let's just take basketball. Okay, there is a clear difference between the ecology, the environment, and the demands of 5v5 high school varsity basketball compared to 3v3 on court basketball, outdoor court in a park or a public space, compared to shooting hoops on my own. Now, each of those have different levels of motivation and different relationships. So you might well have kids who just like shooting hoops on their own because they just love the challenge. They love the challenge. Can I get high percentage of free throws? 3v3 might be all about the fun. It might be about the social interaction. It might be about connecting with the environment. And kids in varsity, they've probably got lots of challenge. They probably really enjoy or thrive on developing motor competency and extending their skill set, etc. So this is a really personal journey. Again, that magic word that appears in Standard 4. This is personal. Therefore, we need to know our students as well as we can. So if we take these ideas and in Standard 4, those are people who have had a chance to look at it, the website is really clear. You can click through, you can see the breakdown, the progressive stages of what type of skills do young people need to learn in order to work towards Standard 4. And these are the skills that are mentioned. They need to set targets. They need to reflect and they need to review whether they've met their targets. They need to reflect on activity, meaning and experiences. They need to begin to analyze those experiences, to review the choices that they make in there, and to begin to articulate their relationship with physical activity. And having the language to do that really depends on what is taught, what's the content. So I've put the bullet point here. Where are they exposed to going further and deeper than just saying, how was that? Yeah, that was fun. Okay, what was fun about it? Can we use those 5 areas? Was it challenging? Was that what was fun? Did it give you a sense of self-worth? Again, and a whole different concept. Did it boost your confidence? Did it make you feel safe? So lots of work to be done here. I'm not, I'm really, really interested in working collaboratively with teachers to look at how we extend vocabulary because the vocabulary represents thinking. And there's analysis. We use this really simple framework. What, so what if? I think sometimes we might do it in a different order, but what, describe what happened. So what, why was that significant? And what if something changed? Or sometimes we add a 4th question, what next? So they're all simple frameworks for that can come into lessons in age-appropriate ways to drive and shape teacher-student conversations. But then how do we evidence that? And our subject area is notoriously difficult for recording and evidencing young people's progress. And that's why we built this tool, miMove. And indeed, in this screenshot here, it's around this asking the question, how active will you be next week? Well, straight away, that talks to target setting. And it talks to the overriding objective of physical education, as I framed at the beginning, to be more active. and standard 4, do we choose to be active? So if I could just briefly, by way of introduction, is and I'm just really quickly going to show you this, that miMove is a really great solution for working towards standard 4. It's made up of a student app and a teacher app. And if I very briefly come out of screen share, so this is what a student would have. And we talk about what is physical activity. Well, it's about intentionality. So we ask the young people on miMove, or we give them the opportunity to record which activity they did. And I'm just going to move me out of the way. How long did they do it for? So they begin to journal, reflect, review. Who did they do it with? I did it with friends. Where today? It was at school, but we capture in, remember the language, choose to be physically active. It doesn't say choose to be physically active at school, where there's offered limited choice, but maybe we're choosing to be physically active in our free time. Hey, that's got to be a win for PE. If we know which students are active in their free time, we've got great data to celebrate our successes and to advocate for our work. How does the activity feel? So now we're beginning to get into reflection, exactly the language of standard 4. And it might be, I met a challenge, I lifted a new PB. Okay, that's but a particular performance-oriented post. I finished recording the activity. I have my reviews are here. Oh, beg your pardon. Reviews are here. Lots of other functionality in here, including dashboards and gamification points. And then as far as the teacher's concerned, teacher can log in. They can see which students are choosing to be physically active. Really straightforward. This is our dashboard. And then in here, we've got all of our students. If I go last activity, you can see the fitness training that I just posted in real time. So you can literally see which students are choosing to be active today or over a weekend. And I'm just going to click in here. This is the activity that I just posted. I probably need to refresh. And then this is all the students' comments. You can see how they're reflecting, where they're reviewing, are they applying new language, etc. There's a little bit more to it than that. I'm wary of the time. I started off saying we want 20 minutes. I've presented for 20 minutes. So I'm going to just jump back to here. If you want to find out more, you can email me personally on here, Greg at miMove app, or if you want to talk to any of the team, just email team@miMove app. And I'm going to be quiet there and hand it back to Jordan. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. And these webinars are set up for our membership to be able to log in live. And so I do want to model our hopes for some of our future webinars to have a little bit of back and forth Q&A at the end. So while you were talking, I did write down a couple of questions that we can just jump through pretty quickly. One thing I know that is on the minds of a lot of teachers is that it does feel quite contrary to the way that we were taught to be teachers, to monitor a standard that can be so qualitative, rather than the quantitative, like I can assign a number to this. How do you get a teacher to make that mind shift?
Yeah. But we had a conversation, which I think is recorded on HPE Collective, around what is success in PE. And if I understand your question correctly, it is a mind shift to start, as I said on that initial slide, that Mikhail Quinishtead, that we are winning, our students are winning if they want to do more. And, if we put that into the bigger context of the challenges that young people are facing in 2024 and the concerns around mental well-being, the concerns around physical well-being that adults have. I'm not sure necessarily all young people have that, but this shift from and if I'm understanding you correctly, the quantitative measurements that might be around fitness testing, or how many push-ups can you do in a minute. I think we can really use the opportunity to ask, how relevant is that to young people's lives? Is that really opening them to a world of joyful physical activity? That, let's face it, most people who are in our subject area, our lives have been better with physical activity in it. So, setting a goal, and it is an ambitious goal. I would argue it's more ambitious and it's much more challenging to get every one of your kids to get that positive relationship with physical activity than it is to show improved fitness testing over the course of X months. That's relatively straightforward. But at what cost might that come? How do we know if we're turning young people off of physical activity by having a real emphasis on aspirational fitness or progression through fitness? But if kids are switched on to activity, they are much, much more likely to seek out fitness promoting activities as they go through adolescence and into young adulthood. So the relationship between what their school experiences are, I was reading a paper only the other day that was saying that there's some really, really strong research that adolescents, especially who are regularly active, are much, much more likely to stay active. It's not impossible that someone can come to activity in their 30s, but if you're active at 14, 15, and you're gaining pleasure and benefits, clear benefits that you can articulate, then that becomes a really important part of your life. So I think there's a robust case for it. I'm not sure I've necessarily answered the part of how do you bring about that mindset shift. That might be above my pay grade.
Yeah. And you just mentioned the ability to articulate, and one thing that I jotted down while you were talking is how do we develop that model to have students be able to capture what they need in order to articulate it. And I get to work with high schoolers, so I do feel like I have a little bit of an advantage there just because they have a little bit better speaking skills, writing skills, maybe even thinking skills. And so one thing that miMove does as a tool that can support teachers, it allows students to kind of curate a little bit of a profile of the activities that they've done. And then that then turns into the job of the PE teacher to put resources in front of them to be able to synthesize what's in miMove and then take that into some type of presentation format, whether it's a live presentation or they're recording a short video about themselves. But those conversations, even though they're very one-way presentations toward me, sometimes I get an opportunity to talk back to my students during them. But just hearing them talk about activities that they have had the opportunity to do, whether it's in a PE class or outside of school, really informs me so much about the depth of their relationship, that at this point in their life, what experiences have held so much meaning that they might continue it later. Um, and so I really think that that's a really important thing for teachers to start to consider with Standard 4 is how do we collect and monitor student data with this, and how does that data speak back to the student?
Yeah, and I would only add to that it can also be integrally related to instructional content and teaching and learning. And so you were talking about the age that you work with, but maybe for younger children, young people, and maybe for high schoolers, challenges around. We're really diving into what you feel when you are moving in this type of activity area. Now, I'm always reminded of our friend Aaron Beatley's go-to phrase that young people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so by expressing or by showing that you care about what they feel about is automatically a really inclusive reach out. It's a very, very powerful message. Then learning to use new vocabulary. There's so many different teaching strategies that we could do that. Like off the top of my head, when you click your "it was great" emoji, then I want one sentence that doesn't use the word fun, but be more analytical. What was it that made that activity great? Or we can use word banks, or we can use word selection via other means, or use a keyword around joy or delight or flow or any of the other emotional words or anxiety or tensions, and let them put that into context. And then straight away, you're beginning very easily, you can see that data, what your class responded, and we could look at you know, the relationship between behaviors and vocabulary and being able to articulate. And, you know, it's super accountable for the kids, it's validating for the kids if you have to report to parents or highlight to any other stakeholder in your school. You know, it's there on a few clicks. So.